Here we are, how we got the Bible. And so we're, again, I want to remind you about those books, of course. They're good books to as a reference tool. And this is where what we're doing. We looked at the 10 points over the last 2 weeks. And so today we're going to look at the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, did anybody how many people watched the videos or some video about it? Yeah, I did too. I watched a couple of them. So that was kind of fascinating and refresh us and get us into this thing so we have a context. So let's see what we can see. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are ancient manuscripts, that were discovered along the caves along the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, the lowest spot on Earth. Okay, so the Dead Sea Scrolls are considered, quote, the greatest manuscript discovery of modern times. That's a letter that was written by W.F. Albright, the Dean of American Archaeology, and he wrote it to John Trevor of the American School of Oriental Research in Jerusalem on March 5th, 1948. And this is when these things were first being known and first making the news. And so you can imagine how exciting this would have been at that point in time as these documents are just being revealed. In 1948, a guy by the name of Samuel brought his 4 scrolls to the American School of Oriental Research in Jerusalem. And John Trevor, then an intern director, photographed the scrolls and sent a copy of the Isaiah scroll to the leading American Hebrew scholar, W.F. Albright, who immediately wired congratulations to Trevor. And this letter was really the first scholarly affirmation that there was something really special about this. So we want to look at this. Here's a map of the Holy Lands, and you can see Israel down there on the bottom, the West Bank, the Jordan, and the 2 seas that are in the Holy Lands that basically define this area. You have the Sea of Galilee up north, and you have the Dead Sea down south. And so we're looking at the Dead Sea down south. That's where our target is today. And of course, that's the Salt Sea. That's why it's dead. It's got so much salt, nothing can live there. And has anybody seen that? Has anybody been there? No. Um, we were going to go to the Holy Lands once, had a trip all planned, but then they had one of those intifada revolts and they canceled the trip on us. So focus in on the south down there, the Dead Sea. I'm going to show you a close-up map of that area so you can get a view of this. So you see where Jerusalem is on the map there. Bethlehem, just 6 miles away. And then you've got Qumran to the east, about 20 miles away. And Qumran is really where we want to focus because that's where most of the activity, where the Dead Seas scrolls are involved. And this was basically a plateau that was located at the Wadi Qumran, which is a river. And you see the little river there with the green dot right on the river. So a lot of communities wanted to be near water, not salt water, but fresh water. So anyway, the scrolls were found in limestone and in marl caves. So as one of the films that we watched pointed out, the limestone is, you have to basically use the natural caves that are there, but the marl caves is real soft stuff, so you can dig out and make a cave without a whole lot of effort. So some of these real high caves like this are marl caves that are man-made. So Dead Sea Scrolls are a collection of 931 documents and the oldest copies of the Old Testament. And of course, here you have a scroll jar and a scroll from Cave 1. So they've got 931 documents they think they've identified, but that's not all the pieces they've got. They've got a lot more pieces. So the initial discovery took place over a period of several months from November 1947 through February of 1948. And that was, and then again by archaeologists from 1951 to 1956. They found 11 caves in total where these things are found. They say these texts that they've found here are in kind of three categories. One is the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. About 40% of them represent that. About another 30% are basically apocryphal books, things that are from the last temple period, but they are not considered canon by the Jews. And then there's a third part, about 30%, which are just sectarian manuscripts. They just tell about the life of the people in this community and the rules that are going on in this place. So you've got those three kinds of documents here. And let's see, they're produced, they say, somewhere between about 250 BC to maybe 68 or 70 AD. And then they get cut off abruptly. And of course, a lot of people think that's because the Romans arrived. And so everybody had to flee. Okay. So here you have this Bedouin tribe that were tending their goat herds in the Judean desert. And the shepherds kind of stumbled across the caves containing these Dead Sea Scrolls. When these two shepherds that first found the first load of scrolls found them, they were not much more than young, they were boys, basically. Muhammad Ed Dib, on the one on the right, is the guy who's generally credited with throwing the stone that led to really this amazing find. Okay. So here you have the shepherd Muhammad, part of a group of the Bedouins. They were searching for a lost goat. And Muhammad, of course, threw this stone into the cave, thinking that he would startle the goat, and the goat would come out. And so, but instead, he heard breaking pottery. So he climbed up to see what he could see, and he saw some weird shapes in the cave. And so he got inside the cave, lowered himself in, and he found a bunch of scroll jars lying on the floor of the cave. So here are some pictures, but Muhammad saw the scroll jars with the scrolls arranged together along the cave wall. And so he counted 37 scroll jars, and he took out 7 of the scrolls, left the rest of them right where they were. And
took out the scrolls. Wait, hon. Took out the scrolls or 7 of the jars?
No, just 7 scrolls is all he took out. So he left.
Was that just from one jar?
It might have been, yeah. I'm not sure exactly how many were in that jar that he got. So I don't know if he left any after that or not. But anyway, he took those back. They took these things back to their tents, and they didn't do anything with them. So here they are, these Bedouins. They've got these 7 scrolls that they pulled out of the cave, and they really didn't do anything for quite some time. And then finally, a relative, they were telling this relative about these scrolls they found. They said, well, maybe you ought to try and sell them in Bethlehem. Just some kind of an old document, and not really realizing anywhere near the significance of these documents. So this is kind of a weird picture, but the scrolls were sold by these shepherds to Kahili Eskandar Kondo, and he was a Bethlehem cobbler and antiques dealer who was also a member of the Syrian Orthodox Church. So Kondo took 4 of these scrolls to the Syrian Orthodox Metropolitan, which is a leader of an ecclesiastical power of the church. The guy's name was Mar Athanasius Yeshu Samuel, bought these things. So he was interested in these 4 documents that Kandu had that he was selling. And so that begins our search. Yeah, so when Samuel then got them, Samuel let John Trevor of the Albright Institute photograph the scrolls in 1948. And of course, that's then what started the process where W.F. Albright wrote his letter back saying, congratulations, this is an amazing find. But the other 3 scrolls were sold to the Hebrew University professor, Eliezer Sekunik, who is father of the Israeli archaeologist by the name of Yabin. So anyway, these things are starting to get sold around. They're starting to get some recognition as we move past the 1948 and towards 1950s. Then you have this guy, and maybe you can tell me how to say his last name. I don't know, Joel, is it Roland Deveau?
Deveau.
Huh?
Deveau.
Deveau. Okay, Roland Deveau. So from 1951 to 1956, there were excavations at the Qumran settlement that took place under direction of Deveau. And these discoveries provided a ton of great information. They showed connection between this Qumran community and the caves that were up in the hills farther away. And there were several different ways that they checked this out. Does anybody remember from the videos how they determined that these things were connected?
I forget.
Nope. Well, we'll talk through it and try and spark a memory. First of all, they tested the material substances, the pots and the place where it was built and things like that. And that led to the belief that the jars and the scrolls found in the caves came from the Qumran community down below. So they found them up in the caves, and they tied them just by the type of material they were. They tied them to the community down below, the Qumran community. And then they used DNA testing to help them connect the parchment, the animal skins upon which these scrolls, this is what the scrolls were, parchment, that connected them to Qumran. So they could tell that these things were connected, and the scrolls and the pottery and everything in the caves came from the Qumran community down below. So this had to be developed over time as as the archaeologists worked through these things painstakingly. So as more caves were discovered to be holding scrolls, caves were numbered to help them reference them. So cave number 1 was where the shepherds found the first set of scrolls. In 1953, archaeologists searched cave 3 and found 2 halves of a copper scroll lying on a rock shelf cut into the cave wall. So after several years, the scroll was successfully unrolled by cutting it into sections. They get this thing, this copper scroll, and they figure, okay, what do I do with that? How do I undo this? How do I get it open and everything and look at it without destroying it? One of the things the video hit me with is these people who are trying to preserve these things and open them up and maintain them must have an enormous amounts of patience. I mean, I would destroy those things, I know, because I wouldn't want to sit there and take the time that they take. I mean, they take years to work on this stuff, and the material, the work they do is so meticulous and so detailed that I would just fall apart trying to do that. It would make my head explode. But anyway, after several years, it was successfully opened up. And once the scroll, which they numbered as 3Q15, was read, it proved to be a treasure map listing 66 sites in the desert and other places in Israel where large quantities of gold, some silver kinds of materials, chests of coins, and precious items had been hidden. Because no valuables were ever found, some scholars believe it was looted in antiquity by the Romans. I guess the Romans didn't really care about scrolls. So here is a picture of the Hebrew writing on the left side, and then you've got a translation of this on the right. Remember, this is kind of like a map. It's telling you where things are. In the ruin, which is in the valley, pass under the steps leading to the east 4 cubits, and there is a chest of money, and its total, the weight of 17 talents. In the sepulchre monument, in the third course, 100 gold ingots. Ingots, I don't know how you say that. In the hill of Kochlet, tithe vessels of the Lord of the peoples and sacred vestments. So again, it's a written map. It's not a map with pictures and diagrams, but it tells you directions for how to find things. So kind of like a treasure map that you have to follow and find these places. So that was an amazing discovery. And think about these people, the Qumran people. So here they are, they're living in the Qumran community, and they've, to get away from the Romans, probably, and the Jewish temple people, which they thought was corrupt. And they sense that the Romans are coming. And so then they create these hiding places for all the valuable stuff. And what they did here was they created a map for where all these things were, so they could find everything, or maybe even a later generation could find it. I suppose they didn't expect it to go almost 2,000 years before people found it. But anyway, you've got this. Now notice the marking here, 3Q, the number for the scroll, 3Q 15:1:1-5 and 9. So you might say, what in the world does that mean? So here's the deciphering of the codes, the way they number things. So here you have the example 4Q 521:2:6. That's cave number 4 from Qumran. There are some other places where there are places that were hidden according to this copper map, and they have a different designation other than Q because they're not at Qumran. 521 is the designated number for the scroll. So the scroll itself is given a number. 2 is the column number. So if you've got a document and it's maybe you've got a fragment of it, you can kind of figure out where this fits into the pieces. And you've got 6 is the line number, or at least where it starts. So this scroll is text 521 from cave 4 at Qumran, column 2, line 6. Anybody have any questions about how they number all of this? Nope. So here's cave 4. What was that?
I don't have any questions about the numbering, but what was that treasure for? Like, did they was the temple or something like completely like scattered, or like what was it for?
You mean, what did they create a map for? Why were they hiding it all?
Yeah, why did they have to hide treasure, and for what?
Well, I think, okay, basically what they think happened is that these were Essenes, they think. Essenes were an ascetic people. They were purists. They thought that the Jews of Jerusalem and the temple had gotten too corrupt and were not pure enough. And so they decided that they needed to get away from this whole thing, the corruption of Jerusalem, and to create their own community, kind of like the monks did later on, when the Christian monks get away from the perversion of the corruption. And so they move out and they set up a little community. It's a humble community. They have specific rules, communal kind of community. And that's where some of the rules are great, because we see those in the caves. And then they think what happened probably was that, the Romans came in 68 AD, trying to put down a revolt of the Jews. And they came into Jerusalem and started, beating up on the Jews. And by 70 AD, of course, even the temple was destroyed by the Romans. So you have these people in the Qumran community who are only 20 miles away from Jerusalem, and they're watching what's going on in Jerusalem. And they've been collecting these library, these scrolls for who knows how long, years, and keeping their own library. And so they then decide, hey, we better hide our valuables because the Romans may be coming after us. And so they go up into the mountains, they go some other places, and they put all of their stuff in hidden places. And then they create this map, this copper scroll, which is a map for where things are. And so the thought is that they probably expected, when everything calmed down and it wasn't so crazy, that they would come back and collect everything that they had hidden. And that never happened. So the speculation is, well, did they all get wiped out by the Romans when they came up that way? Or did they flee and never come back? We're just not exactly sure what happened to the Qumran community. But they seem to mysteriously just disappear around somewhere between 68 and 70 AD, which is about the time the Romans were destroying Jerusalem 20 miles away. And part of the reason we know that date is because they were writing documents up until that time that are part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then it just stops. There are no more documents written after that.
Were they like saving this? Were they like temple treasures that they were trying to put back once they were able to get back? Or was it to like fund their...
No, these weren't items from the temple. Not as far as the gold and the silver, as far as I know. They were other things. They were hoping, and we'll see this later on, they were hoping for a new temple that was going to be created. And it was going to be the perfect temple, since the other one was all corrupt. The other one was built by Herod the Great, who a lot of the Jews didn't even accept as a Jew because he kind of married into Judaism and was appointed by the Romans. And so they were kind of working off the idea that God was going to come and help them create a new temple at some point in time. But these weren't things that were actually taken from the Jerusalem temple, as far as we know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was like, why would there be treasure? Like, if, I don't know, if it was information trying to preserve.
So like the monks, you oftentimes had people who were well-to-do and had assets. And then when you came to the community, the Qumran community, you basically gave up everything that you had. And that went into the treasury, into the pot. And then they did things that they made things, they sold things. So it's kind of like a precursor to the monks in the monasteries. You if you were a Christian monk, you'd come, maybe you'd have wealth, like Francis of Assisi, you'd have wealth and then you'd give it all up. And so it would be given to the church in some fashion. So that's kind of the same thing that's happening to Qumran right here.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Okay, let's see, we saw that. Okay, saw that. So here in Cave 4, the Bedouins found 15,000 scroll fragments. And archaeologists then found another 40,000 beneath the cave floor. So these are not full documents. These are pieces of documents that have, they've fallen apart or something's happened. And so that's why we say there's like 931 manuscripts, but there's lots of fragments too that these people found. So in this area, in this cave alone, there were like 400 manuscripts, and 100 of them were biblical texts. So here's the École Biblique University and Rockefeller Museum. They worked on examining and translating the documents. Again, a very long procedure to first of all, after you got everything opened up and you could start photographing and looking at it, a lot of these things were so light or dark that it was hard to actually make out the words. And so they eventually had to use infrared and other things to try and make the words come to life so they could see where the letters were. And so this was a very painstaking process, and it took years. In fact, they still haven't reviewed all of the documents. They still haven't fully examined everything that was in the Dead Sea Scrolls, as far as I know. So this is a long process, tedious, long process.
How much of the Bible did they find?
Well, they found everything except the book of Esther.
Hmm.
So Esther was the only thing that was missing.
Did
From
they
the
find any extra books that aren't in the current Bible?
Yeah. So they found there's about 30%. So about 40% of the materials are from the Bible, the Old Testament Bible, and all they're missing is Esther. On the they also found about 30% are what we would call apocryphal writings. So these are things that are written about Jewish faith, stories, things like that, but they were never accepted by the Jews as canon. Again, I liken them to like the way we look at Christian writers today, Max Lucado, Charles Swindoll. We think, yeah, this is good stuff, but it's not scripture. And then they had another 30% that were what we call sectarian documents. They were about the rules and the procedures and process and just about the life of the community, the Qumran community. Okay. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So remember, we left off with Samuel holding 4 of these scrolls. So in 1954, Samuel offered his 4 scrolls for sale in an ad in the Wall Street Journal. So, today you'd probably do it on Craigslist or eBay or something like that. But this indicates to me that even at this point, I'm not sure Samuel understood the significance of these documents. Because it's difficult to imagine he would have just put an ad in the paper if he had realized, the value. Of course, maybe the other side is he wanted to get top dollar for his manuscripts, and maybe this is the way to put out word to do that. But the significance of this thing is, this is for 2,000 years, this is a library that was hidden from the world. Nobody knew it was there. And it gives us the ability to step back in time to the time of Jesus and before, and to get a detailed look at how these people lived, and to confirm the accuracy of the Old Testament translations with which we were familiar before this. So this is a tremendous find. So the guy I mentioned before, this archaeologist Yadin, purchased the scrolls from Israel for $250,000, and they're exhibited in the Shrine of the Book in the Museum of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this is in Jerusalem, and in the little picture there in the center, you can see there's little stands where they have the manuscripts under glass and hidden away. So a little bit like the way we have, if you've been to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., you see the Constitution and other priceless documents of American heritage that are under, they're in display cases all around the room. Of course, the Declaration of Independence is up in that huge vault window, and it goes down at night and comes back up in the vault. But the others are on these display glassed-in tables that you can walk around and look at. And that's the way they've got the Dead Sea Scrolls here. So after the discovery of the scrolls in Cave 1, these Bedouin shepherds started searching the nearby caves and trying to find others. And so you had, here's Bedouin Sheikh Muhammad Hamid Ubayat, who points to a place in Cave 11 where he found scrolls and the bronze artifacts in the 1950s. So he's hunting, you had other shepherds come in and try and follow the footsteps of the 2 that initially found the first scrolls. So actually Cave 11 was the last cave that they found things in. So here's Yadin recovering the temple scroll, looking at it. The temple scroll was very important. It was in 1967, a Cave 11 scroll damaged from improper storage surfaced at Kando's home in Bethlehem. Remember Kando? He was the cobbler antiques dealer who originally bought these 7 manuscripts from the shepherds. So anyway, this is found just at Kando's home in 1967. And so good old Yadin takes this thing and starts looking at it, and he calls it the temple scroll because of its description of the anticipated new temple that God is going to bring about. This new temple is the perfect temple without all the corruption of the old temple and the Jews. So they've got something to look forward to. And the Qumran community believed in this, that the new temple was going to be built. In fact, you have a lot of people today that look at maybe God will build a new temple. So here's a picture of the temple scroll. Again, it's believed that these Jews fled Jerusalem because of their discontent with the priests and the way the temple was run. They hoped that a new temple was going to be built. They were ascetics with a strict ritual of communal life.
Straight line.
What's that? Oh, anyway, they, they hid things as the Romans came. And we just don't know exactly what happened because they apparently never came back. So this is the longest scroll of all of them. So that's kind of fascinating. Operation Scroll was an archaeological salvage operation conducted in 1994, shortly after the signing of the Declaration of Principles in September 1993 between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority. So the Palestinians were going to be getting some land here out of this deal. And they demanded that the Israelis turn over all this territory around Jericho and other places, and which included the Judean hills containing the caves in which the scrolls were hidden. So Israel went to work. Israel really knows how to make things happen. And they decided, okay, before they turn this over, they're going to make sure they get everything out of this area. So Operation Scroll was a heavy duty, dedicated effort to send archaeologists in and find everything that they could find in the Qumran area so that they didn't leave anything behind, because they figured once they left the area, they were never going to get their hands on anything that was left. So they did this with a lot of people. The territory, they never did find anything more. They finally got to the point where they just said, hey, there can't be anything else here because we can't find anything. And at that point, they thought, okay, we're safe now at this point. But they never did turn the territory over to the Palestinian Authority. So anyway, we think we got everything because of their efforts at that point. Now, connecting the Qumran community with the scroll caves. In 1995, Megan Broshny and Haran Eshel excavated the caves north of the Qumran Plateau, and they identified trails between the settlement and the caves. So you had cave 1, 2, 3, and 11 all had trails that they could find. And some of this, again, they used aerial photography with infrared to develop the cave, the trails that these people would use. And so this was evidence that the Qumran community did have connection to the caves in which the scrolls were hidden. And again, it's just fascinating to me to kind of think and imagine these people as they, here they are gathering their treasures and hiding them in these caves, making treks day after day because they know the Romans are over here getting ready to, they're doing real damage in Jerusalem, and Qumran's probably going to be next. And so they're getting rid of everything that they can so that it's all hidden for later generations. They just didn't know later generations was going to be almost 2,000 years later. So I want to stop right now. This is actually about halfway through what I wanted to share with you on the Dead Sea Scrolls, But rather than starting on the second half, I want to just stop and see if there's any questions or comments or anything like that at this point.
I was sort of surprised to find out that there had been an effort to actually tape things together.
Yeah,
It seems,
yeah.
I would have thought that even then, unless it were some of these shepherds or something, that the people that were in more educated would have realized it was not a good idea to tape them together.
Well, yeah, and what you're talking about is the fact that, you know, when they tried to piece these fragments together and they would tape them with this, well, it was a special tape, and I think they believed they were being careful about it. I don't think it was the shepherds. I think it was the archaeologists that were trying to preserve this stuff. But the problem is the tape started blending in with the manuscript and the document itself. And so when you pull the tape off, it had damaged the document. And so they had to they had to undo the work that they had done. Later archaeologists had to undo that. And that's one of the things. As I was watching the video of them trying to do this, I thought, there's no way I could do that. I would not have the patience to be as careful with a document as they are with the documents. But you know, they develop new processes and get better at it, I guess, as they're working on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a number of art schools where you go and you actually learn how to preserve documents. And there's a real science and art to it.
One of the things that fascinated me about the video was the people who were saying, we see this work as a ministry for God. This is God's calling for us to do this. And so, you know, this is divine work. They were seeing their work as divine work to preserve these documents. Other thoughts or questions or comments?
But wasn't the work done across religions too? I mean, it wasn't just Christian and just Hebrew.
Yeah.
Jewish.
Well, the Christians and the Jews worked together on it. I'm not sure there were any Muslims that worked on it. But the Christians and the Jews definitely had a fascination with this thing, and both wanted to keep this and preserve it and maintain it. So I don't remember, I could be wrong, but I don't remember any Muslims that were working on it. Other thoughts, questions, or anything? Let's just close in a word of prayer, okay? Dear Father, we thank you so much for being with us, for bringing us together, for allowing us to study here together. And we're just so thankful that we have things like the Dead Sea Scrolls, which can help us look back in time and see what was going on 1,000 years before, well, 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years ago. It's just fascinating to us. So thank you for guiding us in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray this. Amen. All right.
Amen.
See you
Thank you,
guys.
Steve.
Hi, thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
All right.